Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 times the clothes made the man die. We are all familiar with the expression fashion victim, but the following 10 people give the phrase a whole new meaning. Getting killed by your own clothing sounds highly unlikely, and yet every now and then this is exactly what happens. Clothing might be one of the most basic human needs, but instead of protection under bizarre circumstances, it can become an instrument of death. Number 10. Killed by her father's dusty clothes. Marjorie Conway was always happy to see her dad return from work, but little did she know that he was bringing death along with him. Asbestos has been mined since the 1800s and was deemed a very versatile, useful material. It is naturally resistant to fire, heat, and chemicals, and it doesn't conduct electricity. This miracle mineral ended up being used in a myriad of products, especially in the building industry, but as with all things that are too good to be true, it turned out that there was a big catch. Asbestos, it was soon discovered, posed a serious health risk and can be extremely deadly. Its microscopic fibers can unfortunately be breathed in when they're airborne. Sadly, the results are often pretty bleak for the person who ends up with these bits trapped in their lungs. The outcome is usually lung cancer, mesothelioma, and other lung-related problems. It doesn't happen overnight, though, as seen in the case of Marjorie Conway, who succumbed to mesothelioma at the age of 49. Marjorie's death was caused by her father's clothes, or more specifically, the asbestos dust and particles that it was coated in. Her father was a pipe and boiler insulator, and he regularly worked with asbestos and ended up bringing home the dust on his clothes. Because Marjorie inhaled this dust throughout her childhood, it was inevitable that she contracted mesothelioma. Like many companies that dealt with asbestos, the one her father worked for ended up having to pay £150,000 in damages because of what happened. Number 9. Strangled while hanging the washing. Hanging out the washing to dry is a chore for sure, but few people would describe it as dangerous or in any way life-threatening. However, a man named Brian DePledge discovered that even this innocuous activity has the potential to end your life. In a sequence of events that sound more like it was lifted from the pages of Final Destination, the 38-year-old father of two was strangled to death by his own clothes horse. According to one of the detectives that was working on the bizarre case, it would appear that DePledge fell into the clothes horse, which then wedged his chest and neck in its rungs as it collapsed. DePledge was unable to untangle himself, and more than likely only succeeded in tightening the grip of the bars even more as he struggled. Even the coroner handling the case was puzzled by the event and noted that the odds of it happening was probably even lower than getting hit by a meteorite or by lightning. While nobody can say for sure, it seems like DePledge tripped over a stool before landing in the clothes horse. He ended up getting tangled in the rungs and was weighed down by the wet clothes. Number 8. Crushed at a bowling alley. Getting pulled into heavy machinery by your clothes is another gruesome death straight out of a horror movie, but it's actually not unheard of in real life. One incident happened at Acme Industries. No, not the Acme from Roadrunner cartoons. What happened was a 50-year-old man died after his clothing got caught in some machinery. It's not just industrial equipment, though, that can cause serious damage either, but anything that has gears and pulleys. Take, for example, the case of a man who was killed by the pin setter machine at a bowling alley. After being sent to investigate a problem with one of the back lanes, the 53-year-old maintenance worker failed to respond when he was called. After an investigation, he was found killed by the machinery. As he was someone with decades of experience, it just seems it was all a freak accident. Number 7. Hypothermia from too many layers of clothing. It might seem like common sense to add a few layers of clothing in order to keep warm, but according to a pathologist, doing so can actually result in hypothermia. His statement is in response to the deaths of numerous migrants who attempted to make the Mediterranean crossing. The problem is that their clothes inevitably become wet during the crossing, and it makes it impossible for the migrants to remain warm. The pathologist added that the extra layers of clothing actually make it much worse than simply wearing a single layer. It is not just hypothermia that can result from the extra clothing, but another potentially fatal risk as well is drowning. If boats capsize, it can be impossible for even an experienced swimmer to keep their head above water while being weighed down by multiple layers of clothing. Number 6. Suffocated by burning pants. When a 67-year-old man from Stone Creek Township got dressed one morning, he had no idea that his clothes would be the cause of his death later that day. The man was named James Schaefer, and he suffered from a knee condition, which he decided to soothe with a warm towel. Schaefer warmed the towel in his microwave, but due to the fact that he was blind, he did not know it was burning when he removed it from the microwave. As soon as Schaefer placed the towel on his pants, it caught fire. Although he was able to extinguish the fire and call 911, Schaefer ended up with burn wounds over over 80% of his body. Despite being alive and very apologetic when the fire department arrived, Schaefer later succumbed to smoke inhalation caused by his burning clothes. Highly flammable clothes are also linked to 9 other deaths, which led to a recall of garments by a Pakistani manufacturer. Number 5. Shot by a sock. Sorting donated clothing in the back room of a store is about as harmless an activity as you can get, but thanks to a freak accident, it still resulted in the death of a woman. The woman in question, Carmen Dominguez, was busy sorting through clothing that was dropped off at a thrift store. Tragedy struck when a co-worker shook a sock, causing the .22 caliber gun that was hidden inside to fall out. As the loaded weapon fell into the man's hand, it discharged and Dominguez was hit in the chest. Although she was immediately rushed to hospital, Dominguez did not survive the ordeal and was pronounced dead on arrival. Police investigated the matter, but since anyone could have dropped the clothes off at the donation box, there was no way to determine who stashed the weapon in the sock. Number 4. Killed in a fight about clothing. Sharing is caring, but 2 brothers from the little Haiti neighborhood of Miami lost their lives over clothing. According to reports, 16-year-old Stanley got into a fight with his 14-year-old brother Stephen over the sharing of clothes. Apparently, Stanley wanted to wear his brother's clothes, but Stephen refused. In a fit of anger, Stanley turned a gun on his brother and shot him. He walked over to a nearby parking lot. There, he committed suicide with the same weapon. Friends and family members were left in shock after the senseless incident. And remarkably, this is not the first time that an argument over clothes between siblings turned deadly. A 17-year-old girl from Northern California was fatally shot by her younger brother because she allegedly bleached some of his clothes. Number 3. Murdered for wearing Western culture clothing. While it often takes very little excuse for humans to kill one another, it is still shocking that someone would murder their pregnant wife over her choice of clothes. However, this is exactly what happened to a 27-year-old Indian woman who lived in Italy. Her body was discovered in a river nearly 6 months after she was reported missing by her father. Although her husband maintained that he was sure she had left him, he confessed to killing her after the body was found on the riverbank. It transpired that the man murdered his 3-month pregnant wife as punishment for dressing in Western clothing. There are also numerous gang-related killings where people end up murdered simply for wearing the wrong type of clothes. Number 2. Gassed by trousers. Back in 1928, a 40-year-old man had the misfortune of getting killed by pants. Not only was he not the owner of the pants, but he wasn't even wearing them at the time. According to a newspaper article, the man snatched a suit of clothes from a tenant who owed him rent. He then told the tenant that he could get the clothes back when the rent had been paid. He then tossed the clothes across the room where they landed on a small gas stove. The tenant, keen to get his clothes back, returned the next day with the money, but nobody answered his knocking. When he entered the room, he found the landlord dead and a lingering odor of gas in the room. It would seem that when the clothes were thrown on the stove, a belt strap from the trousers caught on a lever, which opened the gas. Number 1. Drowned by a wedding dress. Trashing a wedding dress for the sake of dramatic photos is a popular activity for adventurous brides, but it's not without risk. A 30-year-old bride from Canada was killed by her own wedding dress only a few months after getting married. The event took place near the Darwin Falls in Quebec, where Maria Pantazopoulos waded into a river for some dramatic photos. Her intention was to get some photos of her floating in the water. However, the dress became soaked as Maria was swept downstream by the tides. Her husband was not present for the photo shoot, but the photographer made an effort to save her. He was unsuccessful, however, and Maria's body was discovered a few hours later by one of the scuba divers who joined rescuers in a search for her. So I really hope you enjoyed that video, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for brand new videos every day of the week. Also, I've got another channel, it's called BIOGRAPHICS. It's biographies of notable people from the present day as well as history, from Elon Musk to Osama bin Laden. You can check it out through the icon on the screen now. But if you want something else to watch right now, why not check out another TopTenz video or a biographics video over there on the right. And as always, thank you for watching.